Hunter. Thanks so much. Great to be here. Appreciate the warm welcome and definitely your masterful take on that lengthy title there. But excited to talk to you today.
I love a little tip of the tongue challenge. It's quite fun.
Absolutely.
So, Amy, for folks that don't know you yet, tell me, let's hear a little bit about Amy. What's your journey? Where do you come from? What are some of your passions in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name's Amy Beaver. I'm the Senior Director of New Business Development over here at PowerToFly. I use the pronoun she, her. And I have been with PowerToFly now for about a year. Really, I always give a little bit of perspective into how I got into sales, right? Because like many people in sales, totally stumbled into it, right? This was never the game plan. I had a degree in biology. I was going to go out there and be a research scientist. And then sales just kind of happened. I initially got my start, so I am a proud member of the LGBTQIA plus community. I have a wife and an 8-year-old son, and I
Hmm.
got my start in sales at the Philadelphia Gay News. So, small newspaper selling print advertisement. And that was where I kind of cut my teeth in sales. And it was an interesting progression, as it is for so many folks, right? You kind of find those niches that you like to work within. So I had moved from print advertising into digital advertising, but that jump landed me in the manufacturing space. And Hunter, as you can imagine, very male dominated industry, right? There were not a ton of people who, necessarily would classify themselves as members of the LGBT community, as women. So that was an interesting industry to work within. And, I think topical to today, really be authentic to who I am while also navigating, hey, how do I relate to and connect with my clients? Uh, but something must have gone well there because I kind of had the ability to work my way up from an individual contributor, started out selling a test product, and eventually moved into a sales leadership role as a director over there. And ever since then, it's been a lot of fun, right? I've had a couple other stops in my sales leadership journey and landed here at Power to Fly last November.
Oh yeah, you just had your 1 year anniversary.
Yes,
Awesome. Congrats.
thank you.
That's so cool. Thank you for sharing your story. That is a compelling story to hear about, especially in that manufacturing scenario. That must have been a unique experience for you, but it sounds like you learned a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I loved it. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I got to meet some fantastic people. I got to sell things that I really enjoyed selling. And it was for sure interesting from my perspective. And when we think about the lens of Power to Fly, because American manufacturing can be something that's sometimes very politically polarized in terms of a lot of the thoughts. But I mean, overall, I found that it was just a whole lot of wonderful people who really cared about their businesses that I got to work with every day.
I love hearing that. And it's so important because I feel it's easy to stigmatize something we don't know, right? And the only way we can actually find out about each other is getting in there and asking questions. Because, like you said, we're all just people and we're people with passions. And I love hearing that. It's so important because there actually is a lot more common ground than I think we realize sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of a theme, I think, of what we'll talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into it. So, what do you see as the current state of B2B sales? It's a very challenging buying climate right now. We've seen the economy kind of do this over the past couple years. So, what are the challenges? What's your take on this right now?
Yeah, so I mean, totally true, Hunter. It has been a roller coaster ride in 2023. I think what we're seeing, and it's no secret, right? If you scroll through sales channels in LinkedIn, you're seeing a lot of talk around, lack of quota attainment. You're seeing things like layoffs or consolidations. You're seeing, a lot of companies struggle with churn of existing clients. And I think the biggest thing that we're seeing overall that's really challenging a lot of folks is buying processes, especially for new vendors, is much slower. And I think we're also seeing that a lot of sales cycles at this point are engaging more stakeholders within your prospects organization. And my takeaway on this, and why I think this is happening, is naturally, as people in business who have jobs to, support themselves or support their families, or the multitude of reasons that folks come to work every day. I think folks are risk averse when it comes to anything that potentially could, shine a negative light on them within their decision making at work. So
Mm,
that's created a little bit of reluctance for people to make buying decisions without kind of that team buy-in, right? So what that means for sellers then is I need to make sure that I have more folks who are kind of giving this the stamp of approval, or more folks who understand the value of what it is that I'm bringing to the organization. Because in years past, we may have had that one person be able to make that decision up to a certain spend limit without involving a ton of people. But now it's commonplace to hear that, the CFO is coming in and getting involved, or we have, an additional 2 to 3 steps in that procurement process that didn't exist in years past. So I think that's something that has really been, for a lot of sellers, a big challenge and a big thing that they've had to, kind of counterbalance with their outreach and, hey, who am I getting to early on in this process?
mm. Yeah, it really is an all hands on deck scenario now, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, people are looking at, how do I narrow my tech stack? How do I think this has been a conversation in the past. How do I do more with less, or how do I do things more efficiently? Right. So when we're positioning something, especially as a potential new vendor, there needs to be that kind of shining moment, or that thing that stands out as, hey, I need to make the case for this internally because it really does solve something that's a specific challenge that I can't solve with what I have today.
Hmm. Yeah, that paring down, I really am also noticing that out there is like, how can I do more with less on a professional level, even on a personal level? It's like, do I need to be subscribed to all of these things at the same time? I think there was that New York Times article a couple months ago that said, here's a strategy. Just subscribe to one of them at a time, watch everything in their catalog, and then move to the next one. And I was like, oh, that's a really interesting idea, because then I'm actually utilizing what I have. And I feel like that can be transferred to work applications too. It's like really being all in on something and not just kind of dipping in, it may be something goes unused for 4 months.
100%. And I think a little bit of it's natural, right? A little bit of it is a right sizing of tech stacks, because
Mm,
so many of our different vendors, start to spin up and create new pieces of their offering that maybe are competitive or exist within another tool out there, but they're saying, hey, there's great value in this specific tool, right? Not to call out any particular vendors, but like something like conversational analytics in the sales process. That's something that a number of different companies have dipped their toe into, where maybe it wasn't their initial offering. So then,
mm,
as a customer, as a buyer, you may say, well, hey, I've bought this product from a competitor, and now I'm noticing that an existing vendor that I had purchased for something entirely different also can accomplish that, right? So it's definitely that paring down. And I think, interestingly, even in the market, whether it's on the B2B side or the B2C side, there are tools now, there are software offerings that actually are geared to exactly that. How do I pare things down? So uh,
mhm,
all of this impacts what we as sellers face when we're having those conversations, because we don't necessarily want a potential customer to put us in that lens of, hey, this is redundant to what I already have.
mhm. Yeah, and there's a lot, I've noticed a lot of it with a lot of the communication platforms, some of which we might be using today. They all are like, they started this year. I was like, oh, this company just added all the features that this tool has, and this company just added all the features that that tool has. It's like, so there it is happening on big vendors and also in smaller vendors all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. I won't, again, I won't name names of vendors, but I was on a call recently with a fantastic account manager from one of our vendors who was showing me this cool new tool that they came out with, and I was like, oh, so this is ABC company but blue, right? Like
Mm,
we've just shifted this to the color branding of your company, but intuitively, the user interface was super similar. So
Yeah.
talk about an area where as a seller, you need that ability to differentiate.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So there's, as we talked about too, the roller coaster of the economy. There was mass hiring freezes, tech layoffs. No secret there, like you said. Are there any emerging trends that you're noticing because of this big shift that's happened over the past year, 2 years,
Yeah.
really?
So I love this question. And I want to talk about the bright side first, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, there are lots of companies that have gone through tech layoffs, and there are a lot of businesses that have hiring freezes right now. And what that means is there is a ton of great talent available in the market right now, some of whom may be joining this exact summit, right? And planning on attending our virtual job fair in a couple days. Not all companies, not all industries are going through this layoff, though, right? So
Mhm.
there is that common point where a lot of this fantastic talent can find a company that's really going to be that next best fit in their career progression. I think the important thing that so many companies, especially when you are selling into this, HR tech and TA space, need to keep in mind is there's still, even if you're on a hiring freeze or even if you did have layoffs, there's still such a value to maintaining a really positive employer brand, right? Because anytime that you have layoffs, it impacts the overall morale of those folks who are still left behind. But then also there's ripple effects, in coming months and years and quarters as you want to kind of staff up again. You need that really positive impact from a brand experience. So I think for me, that's the trend where we may see more of a shift in just companies really focusing in on, hey, tell the story of who we are. Let's tell the story of what's great about our culture. We may not have, a ton of vacancies right now, but we want to make sure that we're still thought of as almost a destination employer, right? Like, where is that dream next job? I think the other thing too is one of the biggest trends that I'm seeing as I'm talking with customers and prospects is that there's still that need for strategic hires, right? Even in this landscape, there may be some attrition internally that requires backfills. When that's happening, I think TA professionals are looking for tools like what we offer on the PowerToFly platform or in other platforms to make sure that they can streamline that candidate search process and then be more efficient with their own time and their own resources, a la consolidating tech stack.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said that there is an opportunity there on both sides because not everyone has gone through, not every company has gone through the freeze. And there are a lot of really amazing, talented, diverse folks out there that are ready and overqualified potentially to work. And it's another, we talk a lot about pivoting at PowerToFly as well. And there's so many people with so many transferable skills that can go into other possibilities as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm loving where we're going right now. We have about 15 minutes left. So I'm also going to just give a shout out to anyone in the audience. If you have questions, you have our, PowerToFly team here as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And I'm sure Amy would love to hear from you as well. So let's move into the next section here, which is how do we tailor our approach to enhance engagement and responsiveness specifically from decision makers?
Yeah, so that's so important at a time like this, right? When sales are a little bit more of an uphill battle and you need to be really strategic about getting in front of folks. So I think, you know, this may sound a little bit idealistic, and that's coming from someone who's been in sales now for about 15 years. But I think to me, sales in its purest form has always really been aimed at figuring out someone's challenges and then trying to help, right? Like that is kind of basic human instinct. And sure, in sales, there's the slightly less intrinsic goals of earning money and whatnot, but one thing that I always tell someone, especially someone who is more, kind of entry level coming into sales is at the end of the day, you're not going to break anything, you're not going to mess anything up. Just remember that sales is a conversation with another person. If you can keep that in your mind and not over amp it up and not worry that, hey, I'm an AE just starting out and I'm talking to a VP, but if you always manage to keep that perspective, I think that's huge. For so long, there's been the adage, people buy from people. We've all kind of heard it in the sales landscape, but it's true more than ever now, because we're in this era where there are LinkedIn influencers and there are brands that have that name recognition, and they've created that because they create content that is, stimulating and eye-catching. You think of the carousels on LinkedIn and things like that. And they are stimulating and eye-catching because they're sharing content that helps for free, right? Like, if my first perception of you is, oh, this is someone who wants to help me, they want to help me learn, they want to help me grow, they want to help me become better or more efficient in my career. If that's what we can do, then we're already on positive footing. So I think the really important part of approaching a decision maker is that's kind of what you have to figure out is, how do I help this person? And part of that is, hey, let's research what are the common challenges within these specific roles. Definitely, I'm a big advocate of, hey, let's look at what's going on within the company, read recent news and things like that. And then make sure that your approach is very simple, right? We all have big, impressive vocabularies. Typically, you're going to find lots of smart folks who are trying to sell solutions. But at the end of the day, it goes back to that conversation with another person. If you can put that in its simplest forms of, hey, Hunter, today I really want to see if we might be a good fit to help you solve this challenge that I know folks in your position are often having. That's probably the cleanest, clearest way of really engaging those decision makers. We're not going to trick anybody into a sales call with us. And generally, when we do that anyway, they're not super happy by the end of that first call, right? So I think that honest, helpful approach has been something that is always the most successful.
Yeah, and that transparency is key. No one
Absolutely.
likes to be bamboozled, as I say to my dog all the time when I trick him to do something. He doesn't like
Yeah.
it.
If your prospect is saying, wait, is this a sales call when they're
Right.
like 5, 10 minutes in, that's bad, right? We've led them astray somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love that you were talking about too about the carousels on LinkedIn, these engaging content strategies, people that now have become influencers in that space. It's not just on TikTok anymore. It's like there's LinkedIn, you see massive followings of certain voices and stuff. So I'm curious, what are some strategies that you would recommend to folks that want to like personalize and create compelling outreach messages that are authentic but don't seem too, staged or slathered together?
Yeah. And great point there, right? Because there's so much ability to just blast out that generic messaging, and it doesn't work at scale anymore, right? Like, it may have
Mhm.
in the past, but we need to find that connection point with our intended contacts and take a human approach. So my advice there is, look for shared connections, leverage your network, right? Both internally as well as within your prospects organization, and try to understand those common points with the person you're trying to engage with. Like, actually go back and read their recent posts, look at recent activities on LinkedIn, because that's going to give you a good indication of what really matters to them, right? What do they care about? What are they spending their time reading content about? Whose posts are they commenting on? That'll give you a good idea of the types of things that for them are engaging. And then the other thing goes back to what I was saying a minute ago: figure out a way to help first, right? So if there's a prospect that I want to talk to because I think PowerToFly can really help, I might go back and share a job post that they're actively hiring for, right? And say, hey, I just found this awesome opportunity. If you're an engineer in my network, check out this job over at ABC Company and reach out to, and then I'll actually at the person and tag them there so that they kind of know, like, hey, I've shared this post, reach out to this person. They're actively hiring for it. It's a win-win for both sides of my network. And it's a way that I can help in a really small way. And then comment and like people's posts, right? It sounds like, thanks so much, Captain Obvious. But at the end of the day, if you're going to drop that connection request, don't do that and then take no further action. Make sure that as you connect with people on LinkedIn, you're actually taking those follow-up actions, because just that repeated engagement and care, it sticks with folks, and they understand, like, okay, this is someone who actually wants to be an active part of my network, right? We all have those stagnant connections that have just been in our network forever, that we honestly don't even remember why we connected with them in the first place.
Mhm.
That's not helpful when you want to reach out to them and potentially move them into a sales process.
Absolutely. A friend of mine named Ann Murphy, who is amazing she's a LinkedIn wizard. She's so incredible at this stuff, and she's helped me kind of understand it more over the past year. And she told me one time, she was like, yeah, I realized at a certain point with different platforms that, and she was talking about herself, and I identified with this. She's like, I was a lurker of content. I wasn't participating. I was just absorbing. And as soon as I was like, I realized that I owe it to these people that are giving me something. I need to be a part of the conversation. And what's also beautiful about that is when you do that, you start to become a voice in the conversation, and
Exactly.
then it's a presence.
Yes, I love that. And we're all going to be lurkers sometimes, right? Because there's that,
Sure.
like, hey, I don't feel like I have the expertise to talk about this at that moment. But even sometimes something as simple as just saying, like, hey, thanks for sharing this. I actually learned something today that, I want to dig more into. You're not necessarily at that point contributing something new to the conversation, but we all like positive reinforcement. So even that
Mhm.
contact who's just hearing, like, hey, I actually helped someone today, that's a really positive message for them.
Oh yeah, positive reinforcement, words of affirmation, top love language for me.
Awesome.
Yeah. So what we're starting to talk about too is with this authenticity, there's also a level of empathy that is at play here. And what is the balance of that? And how do you see that empathy's role in sales?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. I mean, I think when I think about authenticity as well as empathy, one of the things that I think about is, at the end of the day, Hunter, we all have a BS meter, right? Like, if you have someone who is just trying to sell you and who could care less about, if they're actually solving a challenge, we read that. So unless you're someone who's selling something that's super low dollar, very transactional, in and out, I've sold you this, $300 thing and then disappeared forever, you need that trust. You need that ability to really make sure that the person that you're working with feels like they can share with you what those challenges are, uh, has a little bit of an understanding of who you are and what your approach is, because that's how you build that trust. And as we all know, sales cycles can be weeks, months, in some cases, years at that enterprise level. No one wants to continuously engage with someone who they perceive as phony or overly pushy or salesy, right? Like, it's the kind of used car salesman stereotype that's out there. That's not someone that anyone wants to continue to engage with. So as we're moving into more of this consultative sales process where we're trying to build trust not only in ourselves but also in our organizations, make sure that you do figure out those ways to be helpful, because as you become a trusted consultant, I think we see that prospects feel more comfortable sharing about what's happening internally. Hey, we've hit this snag in procurement. Or, hey, I have someone internally who's a detractor who would rather look at this other solution because they feel there's more value, right? The ability to kind of see around those corners in our sales process only comes if we have that good, trusting relationship. And it also allows us to bring more value so that as we're having conversations, our knowledge and our expertise become things that are actually more helpful to our prospects. And they also start to trust more in the products and services that our companies provide, right? So it's very much so, it's almost the first impression, right? From that first impression, and this goes back to, let's not trick people into discovery calls and things like that. We are building that trust. We're setting the tone and the stage for what this person's experience will hopefully be like for us throughout that whole sales process, and what they can expect from our company, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all representative of the companies that we're working for.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious, we just have 5 minutes left. And so we can go a couple different directions left. And I would actually like to let you steer. What would you like to spend the last 5 minutes focusing on here?
Yeah, so certainly, by all means, if anybody has questions, jump in. But I guess I always like to kind of wrap it up with a too long didn't read type of synopsis, right? Because we get into these conversations and there are so many great ideas, but if I kind of boil down what we talked about today, I think there's the reality that it is a hard sales environment now. So we as sales professionals need to prepare ourselves to understand, number one, we may have more stakeholders, and the decision making process may take a little bit longer because of that caution or that risk averseness that I touched on early. So try to understand the best you can who all those stakeholders are. From there, build out that relationship, right? Connect with them, but then find that connection point where you can be helpful, where you can differentiate, why someone is going to value or benefit from what it is that you have to offer that sets you apart from the things in their tech stack that they're trying to kind of cull down and clean up. If there's not that problem or that moment of, hey, this is something where, I'm actually becoming more efficient or better, or I can do my job in a way that I can't today, then kind of go back to the drawing board and dig in a little bit deeper there, right? Because if there's not that value in this market, we see a lot less nice to have buying. It's all about the must haves. And then the other big thing is figure out a way to help. When you are that trusted, kind of consultant, that person that someone feels that they can turn to, they're more likely to be transparent back with you, right? Because we model what we see from others. So, if I think, hey, Hunter's a great salesperson, he's always been really, really transparent with me, really open and honest with me, then I'll go back to that with, hey, Hunter, we've hit this snag, or hey, Hunter, here's a potential challenge in our sales process. So it just really helps. And overall, remember at the end of the day to have fun with it, right? Because sales is something that at its core is about helping people. So I think for me, that would be the kind of summary of everything we talked about, but definitely open to any questions if there are any.
Yeah, that was, oh, I love that. And I love a too long didn't read moment. That's very good. Very helpful for my neuro spiciness to be like, let's recap, shall we?
Absolutely. And weave those into the sales process too, right? Because,
Yes.
we all have those moments where we're like, I know that I had a 2:30 call, but what was it about? I don't know. So if you can give those little snapshots of, hey, today we talked about this, this, and this, and we're going to do this, this, and this moving forward, it's helpful for everyone. Send that as a recap email.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Amy, it has been so lovely to chat with you. I hope we get to do it more here at Power to Fly. And do folks, is LinkedIn the best way to connect with you if people want to keep the conversation going?
Yeah, absolutely. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'm always happy to talk shop and strategy around what's going on in sales. And Hunter, this has been a fantastic conversation. So appreciate you.
I appreciate you too, Amy. Have a
Thank
great rest of
you.
your day.
You too.
All right. Bye now.